What does it truly mean to stand firm in the face of disrespect? Let me tell you a story that unfolded on a sweltering summer afternoon at Buckingham Palace. A story that taught the world the meaning of dignity, honor, and true strength. My name is Thomas Blackwood, and for the past 8 years, I've had the privilege of serving as a guard at Buckingham Palace. It's not just a job, it's a duty, a calling. Every morning, I rise before dawn, spending hours preparing my uniform. Each button is polished to a mirror shine, every strap aligned with military precision. To some, it might seem excessive, but to me, it's a symbol of the centuries of tradition and honor I represent. When I put on this uniform, I become more than just a man. I become a living testament to the values of discipline, respect, and unwavering dedication. That particular Thursday afternoon was no different. The summer sun beat down mercilessly, its golden rays reflecting off the ornate gates of the palace. Hundreds of tourists gathered, their phones raised high, eager to capture a piece of British royalty. Among them stood a group of American tourists, led by a man whose expensive polo shirt and designer sunglasses couldn't mask his air of entitlement. His name, as I would later learn, was Kevin Reynolds. Reynolds wasn't accustomed to being ignored. Back in Texas, his family's oil money had always guaranteed him the attention he felt he deserved. But here, standing before me, he faced something his wealth couldn't influence: genuine, unmovable dignity. He approached with a smirk, his friends recording on their phones, clearly expecting some form of entertainment. "Hey, look at this guy," Reynolds called out, his voice dripping with arrogance. "Bet you $50 I can make him crack." His friends laughed, encouraged by the growing crowd. They tried the usual tactics, posing for selfies, making exaggerated faces, and throwing peace signs. "Come on, buddy. Smile for the camera," Reynolds taunted, his voice carrying the distinctive drawl of old money Texas. I remained motionless, my eyes fixed straight ahead. In my mind, I recited the oath I'd taken years ago, letting the familiar words wash over me like armor. I'd faced worse, much worse. The scars on my left shoulder from a firefight in Helmand Province were a testament to that. This was nothing, just another tourist who'd had too much to drink and forgotten his manners. But Reynolds was just getting started, emboldened by his audience and frustrated by my composure. He stepped closer, the expensive scotch on his breath mingled with designer cologne as he invaded my personal space. "What's with the funny hat, man? Did you lose a bet?" he sneered, reaching up as if to touch my bearskin cap. He stopped just short, his hand trembling slightly, testing the boundaries of his own courage. A middle-aged woman in the crowd spoke up, her British accent sharp with disapproval. "Young man, show some respect." But her words only fueled Reynolds' determination. He turned to the crowd with an exaggerated bow, playing to his audience like a seasoned performer. "Respect? For what? Standing there like a mannequin," he scoffed. "My tax dollars probably pay for this whole circus." The crowd grew larger, a mix of entertained onlookers and concerned observers. Some had stopped filming, their discomfort evident. A young girl tugged at her mother's sleeve, her ice cream cone melting in her hand. "Mommy, why is that man being so mean?" she asked, her innocent question cutting through the tension. Reynolds, however, was beyond hearing reason. The combination of expensive scotch, wounded pride, and an audience had created a perfect storm of poor judgment. He leaned in closer, his face contorted with contempt. "You want to know what I think of your precious tradition?" He spat, literally. Time seemed to slow as he gathered the saliva in his mouth. The spittle landed on my cheek, just below my right eye. The crowd's collective gasp created a vacuum of sound, as if all of London held its breath. Reynolds stood there, a triumphant smirk playing across his face, clearly expecting a reaction, a breakdown of victory. What he got instead was far more terrifying that I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. The saliva ran down my cheek like a tear, but my expression remained as immovable as the palace walls behind me. In that moment, The contrast between the two of us couldn't have been starker. One swaying slightly from drink and misplaced confidence, the other standing as solid as an oak, dignity intact despite the ultimate insult. The silence was broken by the sound of running feet. Palace security had finally noticed the commotion, and uniformed officers were moving through the crowd. But it was the approaching footsteps from behind me that carried real weight. The rhythmic march of the guard captain and his patrol. Reynolds, suddenly aware that his actions might have consequences, took a stumbling step backward. His friends had lowered their phones, the reality of what they'd just filmed finally sinking in. "Kev, man, what did you do?" one of them muttered. For the first time since the incident began, my eyes moved. They locked onto Reynolds with the same intensity that had once tracked enemy movements across Afghan mountains. In that gaze was not anger, not hatred, but something far more powerful. The weight of centuries of tradition, honor, and duty, focused like a laser on one foolish soul who had dared to test its limits. "Guard, stand down." The guard captain's voice cut through the tension. The command gave me permission to do something I hadn't done in 8 hours of duty. Move. The motion was deliberate, precise, and somehow more intimidating than any sudden action could have been. I pivoted 45 degrees, came to attention, and saluted my superior with textbook precision. "Sir, permission to address the situation," I requested. Granted, what happened next would be described by witnesses in dozens of different ways. Some would call it a speech, others a lesson, and still others would describe it as one of the most powerful moments they'd ever witnessed. But all would agree on one thing. They had never seen dignity quite like this. I reached up with a white-gloved hand and slowly wiped the spittle from my cheek. My movements were unhurried, almost ceremonial. When I spoke, my voice carried the weight of every soldier who had ever stood guard at these gates. 8 years ago, I took an oath. I began, my words clear and measured, not just to the crown, but to everything these gates represent: tradition, honor, sacrifice. While you were in that pub, working up the courage to come here and make a spectacle of yourself, I was standing guard over a history that stretches back centuries. The crowd was absolutely silent now, phones still recording but forgotten in hands that hung limply at their sides. Even Reynolds' friends had stopped their nervous shuffling. "You see this uniform?" I continued, my voice carrying across the courtyard. "Before I earned the right to wear it, I served 2 tours in Afghanistan. I've watched brothers in arms fall, defending the values you mock. This isn't a costume, sir. It's a symbol of dedication that you clearly cannot comprehend." I turned slightly, addressing the broader crowd now. Every day, we stand here, not as statues or tourist attractions, but as living reminders of the discipline, honor, and sacrifice that built and preserved this nation. We endure the heat, the cold, the rain, and yes, even the occasional fool who mistakes our discipline for weakness. Reynolds, attempting to salvage some dignity, opened his mouth to speak, but the guard captain's sharp glance silenced him immediately. 2 police officers had arrived and were standing ready, but they too seemed captivated by my words. "You wanted to know if we're human," I said, my voice taking on a softer tone, though it lost none of its power. "We are. We feel every insult, every joke, every attempt to break our composure. But we stand firm because that's what duty demands. Because some things in this world are bigger than personal comfort or ego. Some traditions deserve respect, even if you don't understand them." I turned back to Reynolds, who had begun to visibly shrink under the weight of the moment. "You came here hoping to create a viral video, to get your moment of internet fame. Congratulations, sir, you succeeded, but not in the way you intended. Instead of exposing weakness, you've demonstrated why we stand here day after day, because there must always be those who stand firm against disrespect, who maintain dignity in the face of ignorance, who remind others that honor isn't just an old-fashioned word." The elderly RAF veteran in the crowd nodded slowly, tears visible in his eyes. Parents were drawing their children closer, speaking in hushed tones, explaining the significance of what they were witnessing. "I don't expect an apology," I concluded, my voice carrying a note of finality. But I do hope that someday you'll understand what happened here. This isn't about you or me. It's about everything we guard here. Not just the buildings and the people within them, but the principles they represent. With that, I turned back to the guard captain, saluted once more, and resumed my position with the same precision that marked my every movement. The spittle on my cheek had dried in the afternoon sun, leaving no visible mark. Much like how Reynolds' attempt to leave a stain on the institution had only served to make it shine brighter. The police officers stepped forward now, their duty clear. But the real judgment had already been delivered, not through force or anger, but through a display of character that would be remembered long after the handcuffs clicked into place. As for me, I returned to my post the next day, as I always do. The uniform, the tradition, the duty, they remain unchanged. But perhaps, just perhaps, the world saw a little more clearly what it truly means to stand firm in the face of disrespect. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on the values of dignity, honor, and respect. Share it with someone who appreciates the power of standing firm in the face of adversity. And remember, true strength isn't about breaking others down. It's about standing firm in your values, even when others try to break you.